Welcome to the Edgevana Podcast, where we illuminate subjects in the IT infrastructure space. Get ready to hear some amazing insights from outstanding individuals that will change the way you think about IT. And now, here's your host, Mark Thiele.
So, Brianna, welcome to another edition of the Edgevana Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Oh, no, same here. I can't wait to hear your story, and I'm positive that the audience will be interested in it. And I know we've had a little bit of a chance to talk prior to the podcast, and we both share some interest in helping the world get a better understanding of what a data center job actually is, and why it could be an interesting career path. That's just one of the potential topics. And as a longtime data center geek myself, I'm interested to hear, what your story is. And so give us just, the high level pitch at the moment, 30 seconds. Who is Brianna McCullough, and what is she doing at Google?
Woo! Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, my name is Brianna McCullough, graduated Michigan State University, go green, go white. I have been an engineer for the past 5 years. I recently transitioned over to a PM at Google. I work in infrastructure, sorry. I work in infrastructure in the data center. I have been working in infrastructure for the past 3 years. I started again as a software engineer, and then I went into wanting to go more into the management space. I am the founder of illuminate.com, which we aim to reach millennials and people who are interested in learning how to code and technology. You can find me all across social media at Limitless. That's the easiest place to chat. I always answer. I'm very chatty on social media, as I'm sure you know, Mark. So you can find me there. And again, super excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you. And like I said, I think the audience will appreciate the stories they're about to hear. So, Brianna, let's talk a little bit about the sad truth that it's whether you're a male, a female, an immigrant, whatever your background is, the data center community, the data center world, specific to where infrastructure lives that cloud providers run or enterprises run, is not something that's highlighted on the list of, take these classes to become this at the university, right? And there's some reasons for that, but tell us a little bit about why you decided to follow this career path, what you did to get there, and why you think it's something that more people should consider.
Wow. So to be honest, and I tell people this all the time, I kind of fell into infrastructure, right? Because to your point, there are no classes, there are no people, or if you grow up how I grew up, there's nobody around you that you see working in data centers or infrastructure. Like, they're usually called engineers no matter what you do, right? Like, I think we've come into an era where engineering is so much more defined than it used to be. But like before, engineering was just engineering no matter what kind of engineer you were, in this space. Yeah. And so now it's like UX, UI, infrastructure, Kubernetes, like every engineer, there's a title for it now. And so I started off actually as a quality engineer at 3M, and I out of college, and I worked there in the oral care solutions division for a couple of years. And I wanted to be more hands-on with coding. And I had went to an event, a Target headquarters event, and I'm very chatty, like a super extroverted. And so I ended up having a conversation with who turned out to be the VP of the infrastructure group at Target at the time. And I don't know if he didn't know, or maybe I didn't make it clear that I didn't have any experience in infrastructure, but he knew the work that I was doing at 3M, and he invited me in for a tour. And long story short, 2 weeks later, he gave me an offer to come over as an engineer at Target, and I took it working in cloud and compute. I had never worked in cloud and compute before, but I relied a lot on the fact that I know how to code. I'm an engineer. If I know how to code, then I'll be able to pick up, on how different infrastructure could be. And so, and I did. And so I started working on an automation team in cloud and compute. And what we did was we configured our servers from headquarters. Target has 2,800 plus stores, United States, maybe more or less now. But we were configuring how our stores ran from HQ from Minneapolis. Worldwide, we were able to use automation and tools like Ansible and Chef to configure software. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, right? And so when we were troubleshooting, we could go into a data center and run a pilot, right? We could unplug some of our servers, right? We have big racks, huge servers. And I enjoyed that part of the job the most. I'm kind of more of a hands-on person, so it depends on what kind of learner you are. And I kind of latched onto that part of the job. And so ever since then, like climbing around on the data center floors, which, the wind is blowing because you're trying to cool the servers down at all times so that they don't overheat and there's no cooling constraints. And so in doing that and working in the automation space, I started learning about, we talk about D&I and we talk about, engineering and software engineering. But then I understood there's this group of people who work in infrastructure who are kind of like the forgotten about people, right? Because I started telling people, like, instead of saying I was a software engineer, yes, instead of saying I was a software engineer, I started saying like, oh, I work in infrastructure. People would think I was literally talking about building roads or like that I was working on, construction sites. And honestly, I would probably think the same thing if I didn't work in the tech space, because it's such a field that you don't know exists until something goes wrong, right? Because the data center is where the internet lives. A lot of people don't know that. They think that, I don't know where they think the internet comes from or where it lives or where we're getting our power to power all, the work from home capacity, but we get that from our data centers, right? And you never think about how many people outside of your professional space that know about data centers or work anywhere near. Exactly. So that's how I kind of like latched on. And I was just like, wow, this is a new space. And the opportunity there was just like, the opportunity in data centers, I think, is just like huge, right? Because you don't meet a lot of people that say, oh, I'm passionate about working in the data center, right? Or working in infrastructure. They say, oh, Kubernetes, or, I want to work in security, cybersecurity. Kids don't grow up saying, I want to work in infrastructure, right? So,
But I think to your point, sorry, I hope I didn't cut you off, but I think to your point that most people they don't connect with what infrastructure is. Outside of infrastructure like building a bridge or a road or a house or something like that. And then when they do connect to infrastructure, they as again, I think as you pointed out very eloquently, they think about it from the perspective of, I'm going to be taking servers out of boxes and plugging them in and put cabling in the back and make sure it has power and there's rack space and all that stuff, which is the stuff I used to do. And it was in our early days. I mean, I was working on tools that you would think were the equivalent of trying to use a calculator as a smartphone. Right?
Oh my goodness.
Pretty bad for deploying images and managing remote sites and all that kind of stuff. Just baling wire and bubble gum, trying to pull stuff together. And, it's funny, as you were talking about the ability to manipulate infrastructure in different places and how much code is involved and redirecting how and where work gets done and for what reason and stuff like that. I don't know why, but I had a visualization of did you ever watch the movie Inception?
No.
Leonardo DiCaprio is the lead, but there's a few scenes in there where they literally manipulate the view of a city and they like move the city so that there's like the two halves of the city are facing each other, one upside down on top of the other. And for some reason, thinking about how to portray the opportunity as you've started describing to newcomers needs to have more of that whole, this isn't just about plugging a disk drive into a server. This isn't just about bolting another rack to a cement floor. This is really about, how do I manipulate potentially massive amounts of compute energy and power and networking capability to perform work that literally is what makes people be able to get to work and get home from work and live in their kitchen and perform their jobs at work, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And you know what, Mark, you bring up a good point, because I always think about, my biggest thing is like, oh, how can I get more people, tell more people about infrastructure, like get more people interested, at least build curiosity about what I do. And I taught a class last year to high schoolers, and it was mainly just teaching about engineering and just like different kinds of engineering spaces. And So in the engineering space, when I was teaching this class, one of the biggest things that I used to hone on is that infrastructure is like building a house, right? In a
Yep.
software sense.
Yep.
If you build a house, like, they're throwing up houses these days in the Midwest like crazy. Like, they're building them faster than we've ever seen before.
Right.
If the infrastructure that these houses being built on, and when I talk about the house, I mean like your UI, right? Your databases and things. Like, infrastructure is the back end of the back end. It's the pipes at the bottom of what holds that house together, right? If you don't make sure that that foundation is solid, flat, you're going to have a lot of problems with that house.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, or if you don't have the standard for where electrical outlets are, you're going to end up in a room that you can't plug anything into, or if you haven't thought about what kind of lights to put in, you might have put lights in places where you can't change them, or they don't
or expansion, right? What if you want to expand? Like, if you build a house in a place that there's no room, where you're right next to your neighbor, or you're in a condo, you build a condo style house, there's no place for your network to expand. And you have to think about things like that, because now you're constrained, right? Like, you don't have any place to go. And so I usually challenge people to think about infrastructure in that way, and that kind of gets people a little bit more curious.
I think that makes sense. And so, if we were to tell someone to think about the different potential roles that they could have, and maybe for some, like for you, you're obviously enthusiastic, you're intelligent, you are slightly outgoing,
slightly.
And so for you, thinking about taking a job that might require you to think about what the next job is may not be an issue. But for some, right, they learn how to drive a forklift, and that's what they want to do. They want to drive a forklift, right? And so it is a hard problem to think about from a technology standpoint, thinking you must come into the career realizing that in many cases, you have to work yourself out of a job. You may, in theory, be doing the same job a year later or 2 years later, but you'd be doing it a lot different than you were when you started, right? Like before there were SREs, et cetera, there were people deploying servers and managing the infrastructure, but they didn't have the same automated deployment models and recovery models, and the goal to build 50% more next year than we did this year with roughly the same amount of resource, that kind of thing, right? So that model basically ensures that people have to upskill themselves as they go. But all that being true, would you agree that one of the beauties of the infrastructure side of the technology space and getting into technology jobs is that even as an entry-level person that is racking and stacking hardware, you're actually making pretty good money, right? You're not making that money.
Everyone wants to get into tech, Mark. Isn't that why? Like, people want to make the money. But you know what? I always tell people, because like, I don't like people to lead with that, right? Like, I feel like people a lot of time lead, and it's great, right? Like, if you can stomach doing a job that you're not interested in just for the money, you're way better than I am. Because I think you get to a point where it's just like, it sounds good. Like, oh yeah, I can go and make 150K, or total compensations are like crazy when you get into the big fame companies and you get the stock and the RT, and you see that. And you're just like, oh, wow, I can do this, but I've seen the opposite of that as well. I've seen people say, forget this, and walk away from it all to do something a lot smaller and different because they were so unhappy.
Right.
Money is only going to take you so far. Like, gives you access and it gives you opportunity. And I do believe that money, a lot of people need it, right? Like, it gives you options. It gives you freedom to make better decisions. However,
sorry, I was just going to say, and that's really the way I was approaching the money, was the idea that you don't have to take a job cleaning horse stalls, which I've actually done. It's no fun. I can guarantee that, regardless of how much they pay you.
I work at Little Caesars. Try smelling like garlic butter. It's not
fun. And so you don't have to take that kind of job to get started in becoming a ranch manager, right? Yeah. You can take a job that's actually a decent job, and you can make good money learning whether or not the technology space is something you'd like to grow in.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. I mean, entry level jobs start depending on what area of the country. I mean, I've seen people come straight out of college and come to the Bay making $90,000, $100,000 a year. And I mean, I didn't make that much money when I graduated from college. I graduated 5 years ago, and it's just like, imagine giving a 21-year-old, $100,000 and being like, all you have to do is be mentor. Like it's just a easy way to build that kind of curiosity of like, oh, if I'm making this much right now, how much can I make if I continue to skill up and grow and things like that? And so I agree with you on that front. Like, it does build curiosity, and it gives you the opportunity to figure out, is this what you really want? Do you want to grow in this space? And when you leave, hopefully you saved up some money and go do whatever you want.
That sounds good. So, you've been doing this work now for 4 or 5 years. Are there things about the process that you took that you feel like were planned and necessity, or was it more of a, I'm going to just do this. I'm going to be good at it, and I'm going to see where it takes me?
Nothing about my journey was ever planned. I think the most planned thing I did was go to college and graduate. As my plan stopped right there. Like, I felt like if I went to college and I got a degree, that was probably going to be good enough, and I think a lot of people think like that. And then I got a job and I moved, and then I knew, I've always known. So one of the things I've always known is that I've wanted to work for a big company. Like, I knew that I wanted to work for a big company, and I started doing speaking engagement. I came out to San Francisco 2 years ago, and I just tweeted about this, and I was like, one day I'm going to live here. One day I'm going to be here, and I'm going to work for a big company. And I was working at Target. Actually, they had sent me out here. And I was out here thinking about what I wanted to do next. And I met a Google recruiter, and I interviewed, and I didn't get the job. And I was thinking to myself, like, I'm not ready yet. I had so much, like, I was such a young engineer. Like, I had so much growing to do, and I wasn't 100% great at what I was doing already. So it wasn't really a great decision to just up and go on and do something else. Like, I needed time. I needed to grow. And I gave myself time and space to do that. And a year and a half later, I interviewed again and got the job, and I was ready. At that point, I felt ready. And so I would say that part was planned. Like, I always knew I would end up at a big company. I just wasn't sure when or how or what role I would be in, but I knew that that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
And now I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I know I want to be a CTO, but I don't know how I'm going to get there.
Well, at least you have a target. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So
do any of us know? Do any of us really know? I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know. I think some people do, or some people make themselves believe they do, maybe. And so maybe that's the difference. Like, I mean, my older brother always wanted to be a pilot, and started flying gliders when he was like 12 years old and stuff like that. So he just always knew, and then he eventually became a pilot for a major airline and retired, that way. And so I always wished I was that person where I knew I wanted to be a fireman, and I only wanted to be a fireman, or I wanted to be a soldier, or I wanted to be a cop or an engineer or whatever. And always envied people that I felt like knew exactly what they wanted. So,
but you know what? There's magic in knowing what you don't want to, because you're more open-minded to trying different things. So there's magic in that as well.
I think they just call it ADD with me. So
probably so.
So, Google is a massive organization, and so you definitely got your dream of working for a big company.
I did.
I hear they have at least a couple of offices in Mountain View, and maybe 1 or 2 here or there. And I know a bunch of people at Google as well that enjoy working there. If you were giving advice to someone, whether they were in college right now and about to graduate, or about to take, decide on classes to take or something, or maybe they didn't finish college or didn't even go to college, but are thinking they'd like to get into the tech space, what are, the 3 or 4 pieces of advice you'd give them?
If there's one thing that I've learned, and I just want to lead with this, I believe that anything is possible. Like, I have seen people with no degrees be 100% more educated than I am, right? Like, I've seen people come into this tech space and literally grow to director of engineering with no degree, right? So what I want to say is, though, it looks like that a lot more for people who do not look like me than it does for people who look like me. I think the opportunity is just a lot different, and the growth rate is completely different.
Yeah.
And I'm a big advocate for education. Like, I know there's always the Twitter argument of like, oh, boot camp or traditional CS degree. I'm always going to be an advocate of education. So another advice is get your education. Like, please go to school. Like, go to school, finish your education. It can take you so far. So when you choose to leave the tech industry, you're not dependent on your boot camp credentials to get into. If you choose you don't like technology anymore, the boot camp degree ends there. You know, like it ends there. Education is going to open so many more doors for you. So please finish school, go to school. Education is so important. Figure out what it is that you're interested in, right? So whenever people say, oh, I want to be an engineer, I always say, what do you want to build? What problems do you want to solve? Understand, look at the world. Like, we have 1,000 problems, millions of problems in the world, as we've discovered. Which one of them do you want to solve? If that's, making things more convenient, like, that's how startup founders start their job. Like, they start with a problem and they build a solution. So start thinking about, what problems you want to solve. And another thing is, one of my favorite quotes, and it's from Arlen Hamilton. She's at Backstage Capital. She always says, be yourself so that the people looking for you can find you. And I think that goes back to my original points, is just like understanding, where you stand with yourself, what you want to do. Make sure you pour all into technology. One thing I've learned about tech, especially at Google, everybody's smart. Everyone is smart. Like, everyone there is smart. You're no smarter, no less smart. Like, everyone's good at their job, And so the statistics are, it's harder to get into Google than it is to Harvard. And when you take those statistics and line them up, I always tell people, don't just lean on the fact that you're smart. You have to be more than just smart to withstand the long road of technology. You need to be working on personal development as well as technical development. They're both equally just as important. And so those are kind of some of the things that I would, as far as getting into Google, I was just talking to an intern yesterday, and I love writing referrals. When I meet people that I feel like are talented, I will write you a referral. It does everything for you, and I love helping. And so
right.
The biggest gap I see is that people apply for roles that they're not aligned with. And I see that a lot. I've worked tons of recruiting booths when I was at Target as an engineer, and just we have to get better at telling our stories and being able to align with making sure that what we want, the job is aligned with that, or what we're qualified in, the job is aligning with that.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And it's great feedback. I've taken a note for myself to get a referral from you at some point. And
I will definitely write you a referral.
And I would alert our audience to don't be Mark, be Brianna, because Mark did it the hard way and didn't finish college. And I 100% agree, not only with college in general and getting the education, but in broadening yourself. I am not a fan of people like Peter Thiele who go out there and say, oh, just learn how to code and go get a job and you'll automatically be an entrepreneur. It's really easy to tell.
That advice.
Yeah, it's really easy to tell an 18-year-old that lives with a family in Atherton, California, oh yeah, go out and be an entrepreneur. We'll give you $100,000. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But that works for like 1% of the population or less.
Exactly. It just is. And I get it, right? Like, I have so many successful people like yourself who don't have college degrees. I know people who have 3 degrees that I rank higher than because of what I do, right? That I make more than. However, I just still believe that no matter what you do, even if you get into a job and you don't have a degree, they pay for you. If you, big company, small company, a lot of companies will pay for you to go back to school and get an education. So why forfeit that, forfeit yourself?
One class a semester, doesn't matter. Just go.
Yeah, just do it. just do it. And that's what my parents have always instilled. It's one thing that people can't take away from you is your education.
Well, Brianna, it really has been fantastic. I hope we can find reason to stay in regular contact. It's been fantastic having you on the podcast. I know the audience will enjoy both your enthusiasm and your wisdom at such a young, almost embryonic age. It's not fair, damn it.
Sometimes I have
not
to
fair. But
I'm enjoying my youth. I'm holding on to it for dear life. I promise.
Good. So remind everybody how they can find you. LinkedIn, Twitter, webpage, whatever.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Mark, for having me. This was a lot of fun. I knew it would be a lot of fun. So thank you for having me. You can find me all across social media at Breathe Limitless, BRI Limitless. You can find me on LinkedIn at Brianna McCullough. If you do find me on LinkedIn, send me a note because I get like a ton of requests and I don't know people. So I try and filter those out and only respond to people who kind of send me a note hey, I listened to X, Y, and Z, whatever. So let me know that I know you and I will accept. You can find me at breathelimitless.com as well, and all my social media is there. So subscribe. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, I recommend you follow. I enjoy the conversations we have on Twitter. So
yeah, I'm a lot of fun on social media, and I enjoy interacting with people and just talking. So it's the best place to follow me is on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you everybody for listening, and thank you again, Brianna, for joining. And I look forward to the next time we run across each other.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Edgevana Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast listening app or on YouTube. To learn more, visit www.edgevana.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to join us on our next episode.